morning, everyone. My name is Soha Amber, and it's a pleasure to welcome you all to NEIU's International Business Conference for 2025. I'm the Vice President of the College of Business and Technology Student Advisory Council. Today, we are honored to invite thought leaders, innovators, and change makers to this annual conference to engage in thought-provoking discussions and exploring and navigating the supply chain industry with a focus on Asian perspectives. We encourage our students to seize this opportunity to network, exchange ideas, and expand their knowledge beyond the classroom. I would like to take a moment to thank our speakers, particularly our keynote speaker for today, Ms. Rosemary Coates, for graciously accepting our invitation to present today at IBC 2025. Some thanks are in order. I want to appreciate and acknowledge the people who have made today successful, who have made today happen. Starting off with our dean, who's not here today, Dr. Michael Bedell, and our faculty advisor, Dr. Tang Ku, Vladimir Fernandez, our staff advisor, the staff at the CBT Dean's Office, Jocelyn Rubeck. Can you please give a round of applause for her? President of the CBT Student Advisory Council, my team members, Jose Colon and Suzanne Polikoski in the CBT Student Advisory Council, and obviously all of our student leaders and volunteers today, in particular, Shalom, Rakesh, Siddhi, Venika, Khushi, Lafe, Mayur, Prajwal, Mary Cruz, and Divi. Once again, welcome to IBC 2025. We have an exciting day planned ahead. I would like to invite Dr. Chume Jane Sher, Associate Dean of the College of Business and Technology, to share opening remarks.
Good morning, everyone. As you might have noticed, typically the dean will make the open remarks, but today he graciously let me to have the honor to do that. Someone will say, this is a great sign of trust. Others will say, maybe that's a test. No matter what, I'll try my best to make him not regret it. Okay, welcome to the International Business Conference hosted by the College of Business and Technology at Northeastern. And this conference, its mission is simple but powerful: to equip our students with knowledge and experience that make you successful in global business. And the legacy of this conference dates back in 2002, when one of our students, Lucas Dabrowski, started the vision to create a platform for connecting students and sharing ideas about global business. And this conference has continued to thrive with the great work of our faculty, students, and staff. With that being said, I would like to take this opportunity to give a huge shout out to our faculty advisor for this conference, Dr. Tang Chu, and our student development director, Mr. Vlad Fernandez, and our student leader, Jocelyn Rubeck, along with all our student leaders in College Student Advisory Council. Thank you so much. It's your hard work makes this event possible. Again, if we look at the PowerPoint slide, it shows the conference theme, right? Changing global or Asian, especially Asian supply chain. This is a timely and critical aspect of global business. We are going to have an extensive and exciting program. Topics include, well, let me make sure I get everything right, reshoring strategies. Topics such as evolving trading policies, and topics like AI and supply chain. We are also going to cover how to become a super communicator. And also, we have great alumni joining us to discuss all those topics. So it's exciting and it might be exhausting. Don't worry, we're going to have lots of coffee breaks. With that being said, it's my honor to introduce our interim provost and vice president of academic affairs, Dr. Shane Cover.
Good morning. As she said, my name is Shane Kofer. I'm interim provost and vice president for academic affairs. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to Northeastern and to the 23rd Annual International Business Conference. So I too would like to take a moment to thank and recognize our College of Business and Technology for hosting this event, as well as the planning committee, including students and faculty, for organizing this great conference. Let's give them a hand. Also, I'd like to thank in advance the industry leaders and guest speakers who are here to share their expertise with us today. Let's give them a hand. So as you know, the theme of the conference is navigating the Asian supply chain, opportunities and challenges. This is such an important and timely topic as we work to understand global business, particularly the role of Asian markets in today's economy. This topic also aligns nicely with the NEIU's commitment to fostering global perspectives in business education. So today I'd like to encourage all of our students to take full advantage of the networking opportunities that you have at this conference. There are many professional and industry leaders here among us, so don't be shy. The value of learning from experts who bring real-world experience cannot be underestimated. The insights shared today will help students and faculty better understand international business dynamics in a shifting environment. So we have an exciting agenda for you today, so please actively participate, ask many questions, and make the most of the opportunities that the conference provides. I hope you enjoy your day and welcome to Northeastern Illinois University. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Henwin, and I'm a computer science major with a concentration in IT. I'm also proud to serve as the Vice President of Golden Eagle Esports here on campus. It's an honor to stand before you today to introduce our next speaker, a true luminary in the aerospace industry. Dr. Rudy Valdez served as the General Manager of Engine and Control System for Asia program at United Technology Corporations. With nearly 4 decades of experience in the aerospace industry, Dr. Valdez has had a remarkable career. He served as a program manager for critical products used on the Space Shuttle and International Space Station, and later as the Director of Operations for 7 domestic facilities within UTC Space System Business Unit. Today, Dr. Valdez will share his insight on strategies for engaging with the Asian supply chains in the aerospace industry. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Rudy Valdez.
Hi, everyone. Hi. Okay. Watch a 30-second video first to get this thing going. Right? You wanna? Do I? I'm going to start a little bit differently to to get everybody's attention, because I know all day it's obviously been doing the whole supply chain, and there's going to be some redundancy because with so many people talking about it, there's going to be some overlap clearly. I wanted to have something. Can you guys hear me? Or because I tend to wander. What I wanted to do is something a little more specific within the supply chain for Asia markets, and something that's in my background, which is Asia market supply chain, but more aerospace. So focusing on the aerospace industry. And one of the reasons I wanted to focus on the aerospace industry is because there's the higher level of complexity and regulations and things that we're going to be talking about versus a commodity for a supply chain. If you, at the end, within reason, as far as from a cost standpoint and everything, treat things somewhere above, if you're doing something that's more commodities or something that's, you know, automotive or some other type of industry and not aerospace, but you you take some of the aerospace type approaches, that might be the differentiator where you'll be more successful. But you have to balance that obviously because there's a cost to it, because there's when it comes to aerospace, there's the longer lead times, there's different tiering, you're partnering with different organizations that tends to be high cost, low volume, so there's a lot of things that you have to consider. Regulations, like I mentioned, are more rigorous. But anyway, so let's just get going. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the space segment as well, not just the aerospace, but also the rockets, and really discussing two approaches, not only from a supply chain, working with Asian markets, working with the Asian supply chain, as where they supply to the US, but also where the US becomes part of the, falls into the Asian supply chain, where the Asian customer or a country in Asia is a customer. So we insert ourselves where we have to follow different regulations that might not be familiar to us, and we'll talk about that as well. But anyway, so that's the point. We're gonna first talk about Asian markets, and then followed by some of the challenges that we have. So in the beginning, it's gonna look like, hey, there's all this bad stuff. Why would we even want to go into the Asian markets or anywhere outside of our comfort zone, which is the US? But then we'll talk about some of the ways to mitigate those risks, and then actually come out ahead. So let's see. Should I aim that way? Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So the landscape, we in the last few years, there's been this big surge in aerospace, in the demand in aerospace, especially in China. But there's a lot of different countries that want to be in the space program, want to build aircraft for in-country use. They want to obviously build aircraft for transcontinental and overseas, but that all of a sudden requires more rigorous, there's more rigorous requirements, which, like I said, we'll talk about. China, India, Japan, and South Korea are emerging powerhouses in the aerospace industry. I've been in different companies in Japan over the years. South Korea, I was there a lot, and a little bit in China. And China's so big, so I just really scratched the surface. But there's one of the things that happens is because they're emerging, there's still a lot of disruptions that happen in the supply chain because things are not set up. They try to copy, try to mimic certain things that's been done in the US, US and in Europe. Europe has a very strong aerospace industry, and obviously so does the United States. So they're trying to mimic some of that. And so obviously whenever you're emerging and you're trying to do things like somebody else, you're gonna make mistakes, and they're making mistakes, but they're also doing things that we hadn't thought of. It's like, oh, that's a good idea. And like anything else, there's a hierarchy of from a labor standpoint and costs, where countries like Japan and China and everything are then offloading for cheaper labor and to like Vietnam or Myanmar or some of the other Asian countries. And then as they get more information, they raise up their standard of living, and then all of a sudden they have to go somewhere else to get the prices lower. But in aerospace, like I said, which is different in many ways from the commodity thing, there's an expectation that it's going to be expensive because it's low volume. it's very low volume, but it's also a lot of critical components. There we go. So yeah. So our some of the major, just to talk briefly about the space program, because the aerospace, so aircraft and everything is at one level. And then when you go into space, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot higher level and it's a lot more expensive. Because if you make a mistake, it's you're out for 2 or 3 years before you could do another prototype and get it back in line. And then getting with the supply chain and you're competing with others, it makes it very difficult. So the space program, we want as many countries as possible, even though you might not hear that in the news, but we want as many countries as possible to get into the space industry, because the more that gets into the space industry, the more technology is built up in those countries, and we're able to use it and have less critical paths that are, or critical parts within those paths that are required. So some of the things that people didn't know, as an example, is that a lot of people thought that the U.S. was the only one. U.S. and Russia were the only ones that made it to the moon. The U.S. is the only one that has had a person on the moon, or 12 people altogether. But Russia was actually the first one to the moon with probes and rockets. The lunar program was used, where the United States in the 60s, and the United States actually got a lot of information and technology from those occurrences. Now, since then, in 2023, as an example, China, well, actually in 2013, China sent some launches and hit the moon. And there was actually a moon landing, or moon crash, if you will, in 2013. And then they just had one in 2023, they just had another one. India just landed successfully in 2023. Japan just did it in 2024, and South Korea is working on one. So a lot of times people are surprised that so many different countries are starting to go to the moon. And we hear about the U.S., the SpaceX and Blue Origin and different companies that are in a part of the U.S. space program. Those are mostly focused on what they call LEO, low Earth orbit, manning the International Space Station and bringing back supplies and moving the astronauts back and forth. I know that they're talking about Mars, but that's going to be a while before that actually happens. We have to get back to the moon. So the point here is that there's a lot of, well, these 4 countries specifically are really big into the space program. So the current state of the supply chain. China, or I'm sorry, the Asian supply chain sources 45% of the components for commercial aircraft, space vehicles, and satellites. Not military, because military is, you have to go through ITAR, which we'll talk about briefly, and you have all these regulations. You have intellectual property issues, you have issues that will impact the supply chain. But for commercial aircraft and satellites and space vehicles that are foreign, China supplies 45% of those components, which can be a problem, especially when we talk about briefly on the tariffs and the trade and the back and forth that's going to happen, and well, it started to happen already. That's something that we have to work through, and that's something when you're doing your risk mitigation and your risk matrix, and seeing what works and what doesn't, and how you can properly plan for a smooth supply chain program. Those have to come into play. Reliance on certain things. Taiwan provides 65% of critical semiconductor components. That includes, in this particular case, when we're bringing things in, we normally, for the U.S., don't like bringing in from Asia, or from anywhere for that matter, um, foreign products. You know, we like to do it in-house. However, for like the space program or military aircraft, the problem is that we don't have the technology, or we don't have the manufacturing capability anymore like we used to, and we outsource so many things. And when it goes out, it's going to take a while for it to come back. What's going to happen is with the, what is it, the I have to remember what the name is, the Chips and Science Act in 2022. The president, the previous administration spent $52 billion for that program to bring in semiconductors, because we don't want to rely on Taiwan or anybody else for that matter. But we're part of the supply chain for the Asian supply chain because of these critical parts. There's when I worked in the space shuttle program. Well, we had a lot of components. We made the actuators that slowed down the vehicle. We made the fuel cell. We made the auxiliary power units. We made a lot of critical parts. But when Columbia exploded in February 1st, 2003, yeah, February 1st, 2003, we actually, for about half hour, I thought that our company and our group, the group that I was over, that we killed 7 astronauts for about half hour, until we found out that it wasn't our stuff, because our products are the only thing that would slow down the vehicle. But anyway, so after that happened and everybody was standing down until they did their investigation, we had to replace some of the parts, because there was spares that got destroyed also. So we went ahead and we started trying to resurrect the supply chain. And this isn't related to Asia's supply chain, but it was, we couldn't make we didn't have the supply chain for what's called 93-ton fracture critical material that's used on these actuators. So we actually went to England. We found that they had some, and we had to get with Senator Durbin, and we had to get the State Department in order to request, from a political standpoint, you know, that type of critical parts. They ended up providing some. They charged us a lot, but you know, we ended up getting it. We would have done the same thing wherever it was if it had been, you know, in any of the foreign countries. It's just, we don't have the capability anymore that we used to have, but hopefully that's going to change with the different programs that we have. But anyway, so we do have reliance. That's one of the challenges. We have reliance on other markets that in the supply chain that we have to consider when you're doing, like I said, a risk matrix. Rare earth dependency, the 72% of the market for magnets used in aircraft comes from China as well. I know that right now with Ukraine, we're trying to get some of the rare earth materials like titanium, zirconium, and things like that. We thought that was going to be signed. Obviously, it didn't. It wasn't signed, but we really need. We don't have those rare earth. China has them, Ukraine has them, Russia has them. You know, as far as a whole bunch. I know one of the things that they've been trying to do for years, and it's going to take a lot of years, is actually go and capture an asteroid and bring it in, have it orbit around the moon, and then mine it while it's going around. And so that's going to be a whole separate supply chain issues that are going to come from that. And more technology has to be developed. We've already landed on an asteroid, and we've already been able to move it. It's just going to be a while before it makes it easier when people are not part of it. What makes it hard on a space program or an aerospace program in general is when you're working with people, when environmental control systems, ECLS as they call them, environmental control systems are very critical, because you don't want to kill the pilots or any of the crew. But that's why drones are relatively easy, because if it doesn't work out, they explode. It's like, okay, it's just money and time and stuff, but there's no people that, that got injured. So drones for aerospace or satellites and things like that, those aren't as big of an issue as actual aircraft. And that's one of the reasons why a lot of the Asian markets, especially China, is they have a COMAC program that I'm gonna talk briefly on. The COMAC program is the C919 aircraft. It's in-country aircraft, and it's not allowed to fly anywhere else because it doesn't meet the FAA requirements or the European requirements, because the supply chain that they used was didn't have all the rigors that are needed. And then the last thing is the tariffs. Tariffs are the great unknown right now. So then we have vulnerabilities. There's a lot of sole source suppliers in the Asian market, a lot. There's also, we talked briefly, raw material shortages, quality control issues, but not, in my experience, and this is from my experience working in South Korea and other, and parts of China and Japan. I was in a lot of places in Japan. And then we had a place in Singapore, United Technologies, where I worked. We developed a facility in Singapore to provide some of these capabilities. In Japan, they have super high quality, so we copy a lot of their like lean manufacturing type, and other Kaizen, Gemba walks, all those. Japan is basically right up there when it comes to quality. So from an Asia supply chain, if we have more coming from Japan, that'd be great. The problem with Japan is that they really don't have any resources. They import everything, and then they produce it. So the raw materials that is coming in is already, unless they actually go and make sure that they train the people and they bring everybody up to what they need to do, it's you're basically getting not quality from Japan, you're getting quality from wherever their supplier is. So that's effective. That's a vulnerability that comes in as well. And then transportation bottlenecks, just how do you get from point A to point B, and the networking, that makes it difficult. But the one thing that I did not include here, which at the end I wrote in my notes here, but I didn't include it here, is probably one of the most important parts of it, which I don't know why is the cultural challenges. The cultural challenges by far are the ones that could make or break you. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of my experiences with working with some of the companies and some of the suppliers. And if it wasn't for establishing a relationship in the beginning, we would be fighting with other customers and other suppliers, etc. So it's very cultural driven, from the business standpoint. But at the end of the day, money's money, because I remember there was an issue that came up, and they were saying, "Oh, it's going to be insulting, Rudy, if you do that." Then I'm like, "Well, I don't want to do that. I want to work together." And so anyway, we got together, we dropped the price. I forgot the specifics on it. But then afterwards, like 6 months later, it was something similar, but it was the other way around. And I said, "Hey, what about this? It's going to be insulting to me." And they go, "Hey, business is business." So it really comes down to business is business. But if you establish a relationship with people, you can obviously get more things done. That's just general knowledge, not necessarily special to this. However, it's special to this because it's more cultural. There's more of a cultural challenge, and there's more of a cultural aspect in the Asia market. Okay. Wasn't sure which slide I was on. Some of these I mentioned: critical components, semiconductors, rare earth elements, advanced materials have huge lead times, have especially for composites, which are in the aircraft, because more composite material is being manufactured or is being used. As an example, which is 787 is composite, and is 20% more fuel efficient because of the composite, because of how light it is. And there's different countries in Asian countries that specialize in, or they're trying to specialize in composites, which the US government is working with them to partner. Precision engineering, that's something that's that is lacking in because it's costs quite a bit. And precision engineering is more of the manufacturing equipment, not just the personnel, not just the knowledge of engineering and stuff, but the precision engineering of buying a lot of capital equipment for the precision, because there's higher precision in aerospace than there is in other things. So you can't just go to, when you're establishing a supply chain and you're establishing partners, it's not like you can just go to anybody, because they might not have the equipment for it. And some of the solutions I'm going to be talking about what we have done in order to address some of those deficiencies. Then there's the language barrier, as far as the knowledge, because I know we use a lot to do 24/7 type work, so we're always working on a project to take the huge lead times and shrink it back down. We go ahead and we were working with a lot of Indian companies, and we would transfer the information. They would work while we're asleep, they're working, and then vice versa. So you're really working 24/7. And that works on many things, but not all, because you have issues with, if they have a question, then you lose a day or whatever, right? And something, and then you run into problems. Again, like the language barrier, the interpretation of certain things. In 1999, September 23rd, there was a Mars climate orbiter space probe that was supposed to go to Mars, is supposed to land and collect data and everything, and it crashed. What they found, that there was a key thrust calculation, to control how it's coming down. And it turned out that the team in the US were using English units, and the other team they're working with was using metric. And for the most part, it was, when you contain everything yourself, you're okay. But when there was transfer of that type of information, because they needed the answer to go over here and put it in their calculation here and go ahead and design it, it was incorrect. And that's the reason it crashed. So you had like a $260 million probe that just went poof, and all that time, because something as simple as that. So that's a concern when it comes to precision engineering, and not just the capital, but the actual people wise. So the manufacturing challenges, I'll just try to go through this quickly. With quality control, raw material costs, tariffs are going to make it worse. Workforce gaps, there is a lot of open positions worldwide. There's just a whole bunch of open positions. There's not enough of the technical aspect of to get into that type of work, because people that are technical might not be aerospace technical. Once again, there's higher rigors and stuff. People try to, I don't want to say cut corners, because it's not a corner. It's just that's what they're used to. We received a whole bunch of people come from the automotive industry, as an example. There's a big difference when you're pumping out, 2 million of a product, of a component versus 20, that's specialized stuff. Because I know when I worked in the automotive industry in 1980 and 81. I was in the General Motors transmission plant. They would run parts, and they'd run like 12,000 parts, and they go, oh, you need to tweak it a little bit more, as we're setting up the equipment. It's like 12,000 parts, just, and they, oh, we'll just scrap it and then recycle it and come back. You can't do that, obviously, with aerospace, and you definitely will get a big hit if you're, in the Asian market or any foreign market for that matter, because it's just all those additional transportation, all those additional challenges that are in the way, all these obstacles. Then there's really not many specialized facilities. For instance, like I said, United Technologies established an MRO, a maintenance, repair, and overhaul facility for aircraft in Singapore. Went ahead and built that up, spent a lot of money, trained people, did all that, and that's really one of the few, if not the only one, in Asia Pacific area. It's huge. Everybody uses it. It's super busy, and it keeps on expanding. But it's things like that. There's test labs. There's not a lot of test labs in the Asian market, in the Asia Pacific area. There's not a lot of testing that's required especially when you're developing products, or when you're testing products for the aerospace industry that's in line after you manufacture it. Let's say Nagoya in Japan manufactures a product for you, and they've done all the stuff. They still have to go ahead and validate the testing through quality control and stuff. And to actually get that, they can't do it there typically, because these test sites are super expensive, and they don't have as much capability. And that's why I said earlier, and the capability, we want the rest of the world, especially the Asia Pacific market, to start doing more on aerospace, because then they'll establish their own capability. Those governments will start paying for that, so they could get into, so they could be a key player. And then that's going to benefit the whole aerospace market. And then the tariffs, like, again, that's the big unknown. I put it in the slide because it's a real threat and it's a real issue. Today Monday? Today's Monday. I'm losing track of time. So when are the tariffs supposed to come in? Tomorrow, right? The ones at least for that they say for today? Tomorrow? Yeah. So we'll see if they're the ones from China and Canada and Mexico. And it's not going to be good for anybody, but those are real things that have to be addressed. Again, when you're putting together your risk matrix on all the issues that happen, that's an unknown. So you have to take mitigation steps to address it, which when we get to the what do you do part of this presentation, we'll talk a little bit about that. Then the regulatory compliance. There's the European Union Aviation Safety Agency and the Federal Aviation Administration. So the FAA, the EASA are the ones that control a lot of the aerospace type requirements and regulations. This is the one that I was mentioning, the C919. It was supposed to be competing against the 737 MAX airplane, but it's not allowed to fly outside of China because it does not meet the requirements. Now, one can argue that the 737 MAX, with the problems that it had, didn't meet the requirements either, but at least they went through the FAA and regulations and all the certification requirements that are needed. And even with that, there were still issues with the 737 MAX. The C919, nobody knows, no, I shouldn't say that. It's very hard to establish the pedigree on that because ideally for aerospace, you should know for any product, if you pick up a part And for aerospace, you should be able to identify where it came from, where it was mined. I mean, all the way down to that, the full history of critical products. You have to know the lots, and the reason is because if something happens, you're able to say, is there another, where else is this product or this component? And it's not just the component, but the material for that component. As an example, if you have a problem with housing for an actuator, and then there's like, aha, there's a fault in that mill run. So that particular, so here's the lot, here's where it was mined, and here's this particular thing. There was an issue with it when they went through the process. It might not just be for actuators, it might be for other products that use that same material, so the regulations are extremely important, and the compliance to those regulations are important. Okay, so what do we do? So what do we do? The number one thing is when you're establishing in the Asia market, you need to know who the players are, because one of the things you might want to partner with, you need to know the lay of the land for the most part, so you could have potential partners with it. You need to figure out what you want to do from a business standpoint. I mean, you might want to just be part of the supply chain or working with someone, working with Japan, working with South Korea, whatever, and be part of the process to make something that, a particular component, but it might not be it might be cost prohibitive just to do that. You might want to change whatever you want to align with your business goals, but if your business goals are such that you're not going to make money, you're not going to do it there. Probably won't do it in the US here. You might do it in Mexico or some of the other areas, but so you just have to make sure that you align your structure on what you're trying to do with your business goals. Okay. And sometimes you just have to do an investment, especially if right now there is the emerging Asia market for aerospace that if you invest, you'll be in the, I don't want to say in the ground level because they've been doing it for a while, but you'll be early on, so you'll recoup your investment, a lot quicker. But again, the point is you need to align your business goals with you have to align your business goals. And then the supply chain assessment. You're going in there, especially people that have already been doing work. You go to the suppliers and you go ahead and you do their assessment. You go through, do the analysis and look at their track record, past performance, costs, capabilities, and their compliance. Because if there's been no issues, right, they should be able to prove that, right? Because anybody could say, yeah, there's no issues, we passed every audit. It's like, okay, show me the audit. So you could see for yourself how type of rigors there was to do the audit. So anyway, to get in, you do your market research, entry strategy, and supply chain assessment. But again, relationships are key. You have to go in there understanding what, who you're going to work with and establish a good relationship. I shouldn't have to say this, but I will, that not all Asian countries are the same. There's differences. There's roughly 49 Asian countries. There's 54 African countries. There's 21 Latin American countries and stuff. And the reason I bring that up is we tend to group things and use Africa, Asia, Latin America, treat them as monoliths. And European countries, we don't, or the US or Canada or European countries. Excuse me, give you an example. We're having a ethnic festival in Rockford now. I was in Chicago and I moved to Rockford 40 years ago. And so we're having this ethnic festival and we're going to have a parade and people are talking about who's going to go first, what country, because we want to bring everybody in. And then someone says, hey, and they were Swedish. they said, hey, we could have Sweden was one of the first ones that came to Rockford. So we should have Sweden first, and then we should have Italy, and then we should have France, and then we should have England, and we should have that. And then we could have Africa, and then or the Black community, and then we could have the Asian community, and we could have the Latin American community. And I go, time out, what the heck, man? You named every single European country, and then you just said, oh yeah, in Asia, they're all the same. Latin America, they're all the same. Africa, they're all the same. And they're not. And even within the country, especially like India, there's all these different dialects, there's all these different idiosyncrasies for the different regions. One can say that about the US also. I mean, there's a big difference between East Coast, West Coast, Midwest, down South, you know, down in the bayou, right? Where I can't even understand, because we by New Orleans in the Michoud plant, they made the giant external tank for the space shuttle. I had no idea what half the people were saying because it was like in French or in what's the, there's another name for the bayou type. Anyway, it was, I was like, can you I'm sorry, can you repeat? Can you write it down? And I'm like, it still doesn't make sense. So even within the US, that's no different worldwide, you know? And again, when you're establishing relationships, that's very important to keep a lot of that in mind. I did go to, when I was in Zhuhai, I think that's how you pronounce it, in China, I went with somebody else that had been there before, and I had never been there. And so he goes up and he introduces me to different people. And he was like, hey, how's so-and-so? And did they graduate or did they do this? And he had all this detail on these people. And I go, I thought you've only been here one other time. And he goes, oh yeah, I did. Because we went out and we talked, and he goes, and what I do is after I get all this information, I write everything down on either their business cards or I type it up. So then I study it the next time when we go in there, and then they get so impressed, and then they're able to, you know, all of a sudden they're your best friend, and they'll do anything because you care about them, or at least it looks like you care about them. And he did. I mean, that's why he took he went ahead and made those types of notes and took that extra effort to do it. But because he knew that relationships, you know, were important. He had worked, he was a contracts administrator, even though that was his second time to Zhuhai, China. He had been to all over the Asia Pacific area. So he knew the importance of the relationships. One of the things on being wined and dined when you're first establishing, well, even after you establish a relationship, be real careful when it comes to that, because my experience has been they try to take you, especially if they think if you're in your whatever position you are, there's a lot of respect and everything, which is great, but it is insulting to them if they offer you something like food and then you don't even try it. And so I knew that from doing that, but one guy that I was with did not know that. So what he did, he made the terrible mistake of, he had this food that was presented to him, and he picked up like the chopsticks and he raised it up. He goes, hey, what is this? Well, as soon as he said that, all the attention was on him, right? So they're going to watch him eat it. And they go, oh, that's a sea worm. And he was like, oh, okay. So he's going to put it down. They go, try it. Oh, it's really good. So all eyes were on him, and he had to try this raw sea worm food and stuff. So he had to do that, or else he would lose face. And you know, so anyway, keep that into account as far as making sure that you don't insult your hosts. And then there's a lot of, in South Korea, every time, I don't know why, they would always, you can't pour your own drink, at least in the thing, they have to pour it for you, and then they would come over and then they would pour me a drink, and you know, I'd have a drink with the guy for soju. I'd have a drink of soju, put it down, And then a different person would come and then they'd pour it and I'm like, oh, no, well, no, you have to drink and stuff. So then I would do that. And I saw that that's what they were doing because we had a negotiation happening the next day. So they wanted to soften you up, I guess. Well, there's a big difference between me and the average size person in South Korea. So I started then going back to them, to the same people that came to me, and I would pour them the drink, and then they're like, oh, no, no. And I go, oh, it's insulting. You can't do that. So it worked out fine. But those are just silly stories. But the main thing is really having that relationship. And they, at the end of the day, like I mentioned earlier, business is business. But just like anything else, just like we're all humans and stuff, we want the respect. We want, that's no different there. And even if you try, and if you do something wrong, as long as you try, they're what do you call it? They're okay with it. So then mitigating the risks, have a contingency plan, monitor the geopolitical issues that are going on. For instance, right now it happens to be with Ukraine and Russia, but it could easily be with Myanmar or Vietnam or some other Asian country. So monitor that. And then the other thing is cybersecurity. It's not only cybersecurity, but also when they come to your place of employment, you have to be careful because you don't want to lose IP. You don't want to lose intellectual property. We had a group from Nagoya, I think it was. No, it was from China, a China delegation. And we're showing them drawings and stuff, but they can't take them, but they wanted to see some details. So we showed a couple of things. We showed them some of the products. It was a gearbox for an aircraft. And then later on, another person, they had another question. It was a different person. And there was like 3 or 4 that had different questions at different times. The next time we met them, they said that they were going to do a request for proposal so we could go ahead and build something. And they essentially had our design. Everyone was asking different questions and getting a little bit of the design work and stuff. So that's actually being there. Then with the whole cyber thing, that's even more difficult to control, obviously, because they're very good at. There is a couple of ways around it that we're going to talk about in technology solutions, but IP is extremely important. We need to protect our IP. We need to protect our intellectual property. Mitigating strategies, dual sourcing, that's important. Again, you have to balance the cost, the lead time, all that. It's not just like, hey, just do this, and then you're good. Dual sourcing, especially on critical parts. But there's potential risks, obviously. The dual sourcing on potential risk is about regulatory. If you dual source in 2 different countries, one of them is Myanmar, one of them is Vietnam, there's going to be different certifications, different requirements, and you can't just switch from one to the other as easily as you would normally do. Recommendations are usually to go to different countries, but being in the same country with the same, or in different countries, if they have the same type of regulations, same type of certification, that will work. Diversifying your manufacturing, reducing the geographic concentration, because the reality is that there's floods, there's climate issues that happen, and all of a sudden you have a critical part that's going to come from one part of one country, and then there's a landslide or whatever, a regular issue comes up, a climate issue, and you just lost that access. If you don't have dual sourcing, if you don't have diversification in manufacturing, it's going to cost you. It's not a commodity. If it was a commodity, it doesn't really matter as much. It's still going to be a hit, but these things are, all of a sudden you might lose 12 months to, to 18 months on ordering parts. Bearings, as an example, trying to get bearings. If you don't get them from the United States, from like New Hampshire bearing, and you get them overseas, we're talking like 2 years of some of the lead times for some of those parts. So all of a sudden, if you have something, you order something very specific, or you do something in design, or you have a product that uses something like that, you have to be really careful. It's better to dual source as much as possible. AI monitoring, and I have a small slide on that, because that's evolving technology, obviously the artificial intelligence to be able to do a lot of work for you. Workforce development, we would go ahead, United Technologies would go ahead, and like I mentioned about Singapore, we actually bought all the equipment, placed it in a company over there, and we set up our own company that's Singapore, which was part of UTC, but suppliers we established, and we bought equipment for them. We trained them. It's just like if they're employees, but they weren't. We set them all up and everything so they could go ahead and provide parts for us. In order to lower the labor costs and stuff, we allowed them to go ahead and buy, or to place orders and to accept orders from other places, as long as it didn't exceed 35%. The rest of it would be geared for us. They could use our equipment, they could use everything they want. Once again, it keeps them trained. So that's, again, it's an investment. Regional warehousing, that makes for efficient distribution. And that's one thing that if you're not manufacturing, if you're not diversifying your manufacturing in different countries, you might want to warehouse in different countries. Because as soon as something's done, you warehouse it and you keep inventory. You run the issue, though, on inventory costs, right? I mean, there is no one thing that's easy. You just do something and that's the way there's always going to be a con to any pro. You just have to balance to see what, if it makes sense or not. Talked about that. Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia are areas that you might want to do less critical components. We use those a lot. Optimizing logistics. Multimodal transportation. If you move warehousing in different areas, in different countries, you need to make sure that you have a good transportation network to be able to get those parts when you need them and move them around. Smart tracking systems. And let's see, can't remember. I'm just looking at the time. I was going a little bit long. Sorry. Bulk purchases. Let me give you an example on some of them. This was actually with the UK. The Spearfish program. Worked on the Spearfish program. It's a engine for a torpedo. It's a very powerful and long, as one of the bigger torpedoes for one of the nuclear subs. So we make the engine for that, or United Technologies did. There's no United Technologies anymore. It's now Collins Aerospace. They were bought out and stuff. But anyway, when it was United Technologies, made the engine for it, and the engine is almost $500,000. Go through you can imagine the supply chain. It's 1 million parts to it, and it's coming from all over. Because it was for the UK, so it wasn't an American weapon, and it wasn't domestic military. We're allowed to use foreign supply chains. And we had this part. It was a stupid little part. It's, I think, to put on the nameplate, but it was, however they designed it an off size. I think it was left-handed thread, and it was an oddball size. So of course it couldn't just go down to the hardware store and get something. It has to be something special. It was to put on the stupid nameplate. Well, somebody wanted to do cost reduction, so they said, "Hey, why are we buying all this? Because we could save $50 a week, for something like that." So it ended up that we didn't do these bulk buys on these cheap parts, relatively cheap parts. And we had so much inventory. We had, I think at one time, the peak was 17 $500,000 engines sitting there waiting for screws to put the nameplate on, and we couldn't ship it out for like 3 weeks. So there's a lot of people that were not happy with that. So don't go, obviously everything's cost is important, lead times are important, but don't do something dumb by saving, penny wise, dollar foolish, as they say, right? Let's see what else. Technical solutions. Now, I did not know, well, obviously the AI, everybody's, so using that for prediction models to be able to go ahead and when you're laying out your supply chain strategy of what you're going to do and stuff, AI is going to help quite a bit because it could do a lot of things and give you a lot of suggestions that you hadn't even thought of. Blockchain. I didn't know what blockchain was when I was doing some of the research, but I guess that's what's used in cryptocurrency. It's basically anti-fraud. You can't break into it. It's very secure. It's got its encryption and so forth and so on. So when I was doing, like I said, some of the research on what's going on when it comes to technology for supply chain, there was a lot of discussions or a lot of information on blockchain, and then LOT, the IoT, Internet of Things. Again, that I don't know, like what the heck is that IoT, Internet of Things, but then that makes sense on what the description is. It's really just sensors for appliances and things like that in order to keep track in real time to make improvements. For instance, an example would be RFID. Radio frequency identification. This is happening in a lot of ways when you go to the store. When you go to the store at Kohl's, Sears, or wherever it is, and you go in there and they go ahead and they track. It's the same thing. It's more of an inventory control system because that's going to be important, especially if you're going across different countries. You need to have something that is important and useful. And then the quality and certification, we talked about that. There's rigorous standards, but there's also differences. You have to decide what you really want. Like for instance, DL 178 is software protocol, software standards. DL 178 has 4 levels, A through D. D is highest level. It's super rigorous. It gets tested a million times through all these different scenarios. A is basic. You do a lab that is nothing's flying. You're not going to really hurt anybody and need some software just to connect some monitors and do other stuff. So there's different levels of it. Pick the right level, and give yourself a little bit of margin. But point is that when you're doing quality and certification, keep in mind potential growth. Of what you're going to do. And that's when you start with your roadmap up front. Where do you want to go? If you're only going to do a one-shot deal, that's completely different than you're going to stay in the game for a while. Then cultivating talent. We talked about that, getting partnerships with universities. That's very strong worldwide. That's very good to be able to do that because you get the latest and greatest information where other people are helping you with the knowledge base. So it's similar to the previous slide on protecting IP as well. When you're doing workforce development, you just have to have a better understanding and technology transfer. And then 2 more slides, I think. Regulars or compliance. It's important to flow down the requirements to your supplier and make sure that there's no, like in the thing of if you have an Asian in the supply chain, the Asian supply chain, the language, just the different requirements that get flowed down, because we had something that we tested, we flowed down to our supplier, they did all the testing, they did everything, and then it turned out that they missed a particular requirement, and we were already like 6-7 months later, we had already put it into the product, and then we had to go back and redo all that, and we lost about 10 months, and then the cost. So making sure that the requirements and the standards are flowed down properly to customer. We talked about this for the most part. We just talked about it. And then finally, nope, that's not finally, two more finals. Collaboration, seeking partnerships. We talked about this as well. Universities, complementary businesses. You might want to partner with another business that's not a competitor, because they might be doing something, they know the regulations and everything, but it might not be the same product that you're doing. So you could piggyback on that, split the cost, or get a benefit if you have, if you don't have as much that's required. Now it's the last slide. So the recommendations is leveraging the AI, blockchain technologies and real-time decision-making. Streamlining the regulatory process, making sure everybody knows what you're making, because you can spend a lot of money, a lot of time, and everybody's doing something that doesn't necessarily meet the standards. You're just wasting time. And then a risk monitoring system to see what happens, especially in real time. That's where you get the whole sensors issue, that IoT, the Internet of Things. Finding out where the products are, where they are, and what quality, and especially getting the documentation signed before they go in instead of after, because sometimes people put in the products and then they take them out, and then they go and start checking the documentation when they put it in the next level, and something's wrong, then you just lost months, years. And the last thing is establishing a positive relationship with suppliers and customers. It depends on which part of the food chain you're on, as part of the supply chain. So with that, and I'm sorry I went long, so I can open it up for questions. I don't know how much I drank when I was with South Korea. Yes, sir. So, in order to negotiation like that, and the Trump administration is saying, hey, we'll continue to help you. We want to get things that away, and you have rare earth material. We want to have, the advantage for that is that U.S. most of the rare earth material are in Russia occupied Ukraine. So therefore, if all of a sudden it becomes the U.S., I think that the U.S. would go in there and they're thinking Russia will back off from Bulgaria from the south, middle way. Something where that same thing.
Successfully engage with how can aerospace firms successfully engage with local suppliers and organizations?
Space.
Firms.
Oh, fine.
Yeah.
Aerospace funds.
Firms. The firms. Yeah. Yeah. How can they successfully engage with the local suppliers and the organizations?
How could aerospace companies in Asia?
Yeah.
Stuff in Asia, local, domestic, US? Yeah, they need to understand what the need is, and the best thing to do is finding out what, talking to the different companies, the Woodward companies, the United Technologies, all the different ones, and say, what's your biggest issue? What's the bottleneck? What type of product? Because if they know what, obviously if they're having barriers, if they're having semiconductors, and those are no issues, we don't have any more than any problem more than normal. But we have a problem over here with these shafts. You make chance, it's that time of stuff. So it's really doing the market research. The Asian company in the supply chain will go and talk to the Woodwards and others and even sending out their capabilities. They're saying, hey, we're able to do this, 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 and this. Because for the most part, it's know what's critical and what isn't in the aerospace industry. So if someone says, hey, I have a problem with FPGAs, it's an electronic one, and people say, yeah, of course, everybody does have those problems. So it's pretty known. So if an Asian company from Asia that has products or have access to certain capabilities, and they know that those capabilities might be useful, they go ahead and start that conversation. But they need to do a little bit of research, even though they identify what the need is. They might want to do a little research before in answering some of the questions that are going to be asked. Like, for instance, okay, what type of standards? Yeah, you can make that part to what standard, what certification. There's those types of questions. So the more answers that are in the proposal or in the initial discussion with them, the more likely that's that U.S. company is going to say, oh, yeah, they're on the ball. They know what we need, what type of question. You might not have the solution, but you might say, hey, we could do this and we can certify it to this level. But that's part of the negotiation. That's going to cost money because we're not, we're a small company, but we're willing to do it. Then we have the expertise, from talking to university to talking to different people. We might not have the equipment. But like I told you earlier, many companies buy the equipment for companies and say, here you go. And just make sure that you make products for us at this quality. Any other question? Right. Oh, wait, over there. I'm sorry. I'm getting old.
No, you're fine. Who's bearing the cost of the increased tariffs to the industry? Like increased tariffs, yeah. Like who does the tariffs affect more? I guess.
As far as what it, well, whoever's the tariffs are paid for by the importer, not the country. I know the president says the opposite all the time, and that's incorrect. If Canada or any other country, Asian country, Vietnam has this, and it's normally $1, and they're sending it our way, right? And then we put in a 25% tariff. Okay, the one that's buying it has to pay $1.25, not Vietnam or whomever. So it's the buyer is the one that's picking up the tariff, is paying for the tariff. That goes to the federal government, so the federal government gets more money, but all of a sudden inflation, because that translates into inflation stuff. So the short answer is the buyer is the one that has to pay for the tariff. All right. Again, thank you. Sorry I went a little long, but thank you